The Gospel of Thomas contains a line that was buried for nearly 2,000 years. It was found in a jar in the Egyptian desert in 1945, hidden, presumably on purpose. It reads, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." Thomas wrote that around 50 AD. Carl Jung spent the first half of the 20th century arriving at the same conclusion through a completely different method. Both of them were describing the same thing, and both of them were warning about the same kind of man, the man who lives his entire life at a comfortable distance from what is actually inside him. That distance has a cost. Jung gave it a name. Jung called it the shadow. Not evil, not pathology, not a diagnosis. The shadow is simply everything a man has refused to become. Every capacity he has suppressed because it was inconvenient or frightening or socially unacceptable. Every drive he has denied because acknowledging it would have demanded something from him. Every version of himself he buried because the burial felt safer than the confrontation. Jung was precise about this. The shadow does not disappear when you ignore it. It does not weaken. It does not wait patiently for you to be ready. It accumulates. It gathers force in the dark. It begins expressing itself sideways, through irritability, through projection, through the inexplicable rage a man feels toward other men who are living the life he refused to build, through the vague and persistent sense that something is wrong without being able to name what. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the unlived life pressing against the walls of the life a man actually chose. And for most men, the walls hold permanently. Here is what almost nobody explains about adversity. It is not punishment. It is not random cruelty distributed unevenly by an indifferent universe. Adversity is the mechanism by which the shadow is forced into the light. When a man is comfortable, genuinely, sustainably, permanently comfortable, he never has to reach past the version of himself that comfort requires. He never discovers what he is capable of under pressure, because no pressure arrives. He never finds out what is actually inside him, because nothing forces the question. The comfortable man and the shadow live in a kind of detente. Neither threatens the other, and so the man remains exactly what he currently is, indefinitely. But when genuine adversity arrives, loss, failure, humiliation, isolation, the collapse of something he built his identity around, the comfortable version of himself stops being sufficient. And in that insufficiency, something else has to emerge. That emergence is what Jung meant by integration. The shadow doesn't destroy the man who faces it. It completes him. The man who has been broken open by something real and rebuilt himself on the other side is not the same man who existed before the breaking. He's larger, more honest, less frightened of what is inside him because he has already met it. Thomas called this salvation. Jung called it individuation. They were pointing at the same door. But what happens to the man who never walks through that door, who engineers his life so successfully around the avoidance of real difficulty that nothing ever forces the confrontation? Jung was unsparing about this. The unlived life does not simply go quiet. The shadow-denied expression will find expression regardless. The man who refuses to consciously confront what is inside him will unconsciously project it outward. He will see his own suppressed aggression in other men and call it dangerous. He will see his own buried ambition in other men and call it arrogance. He will see his own unacknowledged fear in other men and call it weakness. The shadow always finds a way out. The only question is whether the man chooses the door or whether the shadow chooses one for him. And the door the shadow chooses is never clean. It comes out as the anger that arrives without a proportionate cause, the relationship that collapses for reasons the man cannot fully articulate, the depression that settles in a life that by every external measure should be fine. Thomas understood this. What is inside you will come out. The only variable is whether you bring it forth with intention or whether it escapes on its own terms. This is why certain ancient traditions deliberately introduced adversity, not as punishment, as initiation, the rites of passage that most modern men have never experienced and never will, existed precisely to force the confrontation with the shadow that comfort makes optional. The young man was taken from everything familiar. He was placed in conditions of genuine difficulty. He was stripped of the identity constructed in safety and forced to discover what remained when safety was removed. What remained was the self that could not be taken. The thing inside him that adversity could not eliminate, only reveal. Jung spent decades documenting what happened to men who reached midlife without ever having undergone anything equivalent to this process. They arrived at 40 or 50 with the gnawing sense that they had lived someone else's life, that the structure they had built, the career, the relationships, the identity had been constructed to please or to avoid or to appear a certain way, and that somewhere underneath it, something authentic had been waiting its entire life to be acknowledged. Some of them made the turn, voluntarily walked into the difficulty that circumstance had failed to provide. Others simply maintained the structure until they couldn't anymore. Jung did not believe adversity was something to seek for its own sake. He believed it was something to meet honestly when it arrived, and to understand that what it was asking of you was not survival. It was asking you to become someone you had not yet been. The man who understands this does not waste his suffering. He does not treat difficulty as an interruption to the life he was trying to build. He treats it as information, as the shadow making itself known, as the unlived life demanding its due. Thomas said it simply: what is inside you will either save you or destroy you. The variable is not what is inside you. Every man carries the same fundamental contents, the same capacity for courage, creation, darkness, and depth. The variable is whether a man brings it forth, deliberately, honestly, before the shadow decides to bring it forth for him. Jung called the process of confronting the shadow the most important work a man can do. Not because it is pleasant, not because it produces a more comfortable life, because it produces a real one. The man who has met what is inside him and integrated it is no longer frightened of himself. He is no longer frightened of other men. He is no longer running the unconscious calculation of what to suppress and what to perform and what to keep safely buried. He is simply present, whole in a way that comfort alone can never produce. Thomas buried that line in a jar in the Egyptian desert. Jung arrived at it through 40 years of clinical work. You are holding it right now. What you do with it is the only question that has ever mattered.